This is NEGOTIATEx TV.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on NEGOTIATEx Podcast. We are continuing our conversation with Maarten Van Rossum, Head of Strategy at Influence. If you haven't already checked out part A of this show, be sure to do that first. Let's jump into the conversation with Maarten.
So building on that, because that sounds like a great kind of skill, this idea of procedural justice that a negotiator should bring to the table. In your book, Top Negotiators, you selected a number of individuals who you deemed kind of worthy of emulation. I'm curious, what can you share about these people? Maybe you should share a story or two about I guess specifically, what are the negotiation skills that they as top negotiators regularly display in practice?
Oh, now I have to choose between my... no, I think, well, by far one of the most interesting people to listen to was General Kammaert, who's a four-star general, Dutch Marine. He's at the UN right now. And he basically said, when I asked a lot of people in the Ministry of Defense, so who do we ask? And they all pointed at him. I was like, okay, then that's a telltale. Let's talk to him. And during the interview, we were constantly, we were only listening and absorbing his really nice stories. Some also really dreadful stories, by the way. And we constantly had to bring it back to, okay, General, thanks for this. It's an amazing story, but what negotiation lesson do we get out of this? And he said, I was never trained to become a negotiator. I maybe naturally good at it if other people tell you to go to me. But I thought that the small things he sometimes did were really, in that sense, brilliant. For instance, he was sharing a story about two tribes that were competing in Africa, in Congo, where he was stationed at that time, and it was about the color of. They had to paint something in a certain color. I think it was the doors, and the color had a political meaning, so they wanted sort of neutral colors. But they were now in a new fight over which color to pick. And he basically came with a procedural solution. And I think those kind of things, this is Harvard method number 4, right? Externalizing the difficult solutions. He basically, but without any training, he said, you know what, why don't you guys make a list, and you guys make a list of the colors that are acceptable to you. And the first one, if we go from top to bottom on the list, the first one we run into that is mutual, that's the color we're going to agree to. So yeah, that's a bit of a gamble, of course, for the both parties. So they wrote down these colors and they made a choice based on this. So I thought it was at least a very nice one of somebody that says, I was never trained to do proper negotiation, but if the pressure is high enough and the conflict lasts long enough, you get to these kind of things anyhow if you're creative enough. So the creativity part to me was also very interesting to see with a few of the people that we interviewed. The Prime Minister, who was at that point also my boss, so I knew him quite well. He really said he says the most important part is courage, and really. I think it's Stephen Covey who said, seek to understand before seeking to be understood. Really make sure that you understand the other party first, and then you can start to download your story on them. But the only way to get to a deal is to really, if it serves both parties really well. And he's known for his deal making skills. So sometimes he just holds phones together, right? So he flips phones and says, talk to each other, right? He literally does that, making sure he brings people together under his, of course, with a bit of power of the Prime Minister, basically saying, at this point, we need a deal, so talk to each other. And making that extra, maybe useless phone call is super helpful in building those relations. So that those are the things that I really remember from his interview. And a thing he called 20 seconds of courage. I don't know where the 20 seconds came from, but sometimes you just have to be very courageous and do something that at that point might sound a little bit weird, but do it or ask for it, and make sure that your what you want is basically on the table at the right time. And one lesson that I found really interesting, you said I'm a deputy chair of the Dutch jury for the National Negotiation Prize. And this year, Feike Siebesma won, who was the former CEO of DSM, which is a big well, first it was the state mines, and then it became a chemical company, and now it's a food company mostly. They're also very active in the US, also on biodiesel and nutrition. And he was negotiating with an American firm at a certain point, and the CEO comes in. That's either the point where you're going to break the deal or you're going to sign the deal, right? But there was still a lot of room left, and there was a lot of unclarities. And he saw he was flown in to get to the point where the deal would be signed. But he also saw we're probably never going to make it. We're too far apart still. And he shared this story in public, so I think I can reshare it. He was sitting at the table, at his side of the table, and then at the other side was the American company. And they were going back and forth, a very unproductive conversation, and just basically repeating what they were saying instead of entering into a dialogue. And then at a certain point, and here's where the courage comes in, Feike Sijbesma took up his chair and walked to the other side and put his chair next to the CEO of the American company and sat next to him, which is a bit of a unexpected move probably for the others. And so he said, "Yeah, Mr. I don't know what his name was. I'm quite useless on that side of the table. So I thought, let me sit here and listen in. I hear you say this." And then he basically repeated from his perspective all the points that CEO just made. So he was really going into the skin of that CEO. And he said what that did is that CEO saw that I understood him, but there was still some stuff that we also, he should also understand us. So he sat there for about 20 minutes, and of course, it creates a complete different dynamic, of course. So a lot of jokes, and the relation went up quite quickly. And then they moved back and came to the deal quite quickly as well, because he said to me that he said, I'm guessing still, but I think the key was that I sat there, I sat next to him, physically next to him, saying, I understand what you're saying, but we still have to move forward together. So how can we move forward together? That kind of, I love those kind of stories in negotiations, because this is actually where the courage comes in, right? People can say, you need courage, but okay, what does that look like? It looks like this, I think.
Yeah. That's a wonderful illustration. Now, half of the folks in your book are women, and earlier you said women make the best negotiators. Can you expand on that? Why do you believe that's so? And what do we as three white men, all middle-aged, what do we need to be learning from our women counterparts and partners?
What can we as men learn from the women? No, I think, first of all, it's a Harvard study. It's not me. I'm just reproducing basically what they found, but we use it a lot here in the Netherlands. And the full result is women are better negotiators, but not for themselves. And I think if you translate it into sort of energy that people have, I think people with a lot of, let's say, feminine energy are better negotiators than typical masculine or male energy. I don't know how to translate that well, but so basically, if you have a lot of empathy, if you have good listening skills, if you have a lot of creativity in you, all those kind of things are really helpful if you negotiate the way we all negotiate, which is not an arm wrestling match. Because you make it into an arm wrestling match, my gain is your loss. Yeah, of course, then probably men are classically better at it, because ultimately we start to fight, and fighting is more of their masculine trait, of course. But what I see is the creativity part to me, and the really understanding part is really on your question, what can we learn? I think that is a part where what we can learn, but also sometimes the courage part, it displays a little bit different maybe every now and again, but the courageous part is also a key thing I think any negotiator should adapt. And of course, making yourself smaller and saying, I don't deserve this, or the other party will probably do this, this, and this. That I think is a downside of of feminine traits in negotiation, and that's I think what explains the comma in the line: better negotiators, not just for themselves. Because if you go to the table and basically say, what I'm going to ask, I don't deserve this, or what I'm going to ask, maybe other people are better. Sort of the insecurity isn't helpful to anyone, right? So I think that part is the part where we really put a lot of. I don't think it's nature, to be honest. I think it's nurture in a lot of systems. At least in Dutch society, we're very everybody talks about how progressive we are. I think we're really traditional here. We bring up our girls, we bring them up differently than our boys. If you're a boy and you're a little bit, you have a big mouth, it's seen, oh wow, look at him, he's a good kid. If girls do that, we appreciate that differently.
Yeah.
And I think it starts there and it goes all the way up until, if I, not me, but if I as a father, I don't know, I see an ambulance, I tell my son, hey son, look, an ambulance. And if I don't grab my daughter and say, hey girl, look at that, it's an ambulance, right? So it's also the choices you make as fathers and as mothers, but also the choices you make in the school system, all the way up until the first jobs and the first contracts they're going to negotiate. And this is where, to me, the interesting difference comes in, because if they start to negotiate contracts on behalf of someone else, wow, I mean, that's a different story, right?
Right.
So we always tell the people basically, we shouldn't fix the women in this part, but it really helps if you externalize yourself. So you have yourself and then negotiating yourself. So if you negotiate, there's a few tips we can give you, but they're basically good for everybody. But we really want to talk to the organizations and the men involved, because everybody has to negotiate in a culture. And if the culture that you're negotiating in is not fit for women or not made for women, then as an organization, you should maybe think about flipping that too. And what role can men play in that? And then I always end up with a sort of a joke at the end, because it's interesting to see that most HR departments here in the Netherlands, the big majority is women who negotiate with the new men and women that want to join the firm. Okay, so the rest of the joke I won't make, but it's really key that you see it's a systemic thing, right? It's the organization that chooses to reward certain negotiation behavior, right, and what they don't reward. And to me, that's a really the illustration of women of the HR department negotiating with new women is a weird one, right? So here they're really good in negotiating because they can externalize themselves. It's not for them, but here it's difficult. So there, to me, lies a bit of maybe the key to unlocking more value there.
Yeah, it's a deep answer there in terms of societal and then organizational and then personal dynamics occurring.
Yep. Yeah, and I like it. This is also what we try to help people with. And even though I agree with, you shouldn't fix the women, you should fix the system. What we try to do is we look at the three, so the man, the organization, and the women. And with those three, we can try to, close gender pay gaps or visibility gaps or whatever. But I do tell people, well, I don't agree with don't fix the system as a dynamics for not doing anything. Right. I have never seen the system change by me sitting on a couch waiting like this for the system to change. So you should at least do something. This is my, and a lot of the people that work here, our, let's say, thing that we can do to change the system. And maybe it's not the right one. Let's talk about it. Let's disagree and let's find a better way. But not doing anything and saying, well, I shouldn't fix the women, fix the system, and then sit on your couch and do nothing, to me is a bit of a comfortable way of not doing them.
So having worked both in the public sector and private sector, I'm sure you've seen your fair share of dirty tricks and hard bargains. How do you handle counterparts that are disrupting the negotiation through less than savory tactics?
Yeah. I think it depends on the tricks. If they're small tricks, let's say, we tell people when we train people, we're not training you on dirty tricks, but we show them to you because we want you to recognize them, and here's what you can do against them. So if it's that, let's say the tricks at the table, they're so easy to counter. We always tell people it's a skilled negotiator. Don't even try with skilled negotiators, because it'll only lead to. Is irritation, is that a good English word? Annoyance in the relation. So don't even try it. It's a waste of time. And then there's two other categories of tricks, I think. One is where you use tricks to manipulate and in a fair way. I mean, I can manipulate a lot with, when we talk about stuff, when do I come back to you? Taking a lot of time, for example, those kind of tricks. Sometimes they're justified. But the first time I always do is a deadline check, right? You give me a deadline and I always say, oh, that's hard, Nolan, because I still have to talk to Aram and I only see him next week on Thursday, so I can't, I can't work with your deadline of Monday. And if you then say, oh, well, okay, fine, talk to Aram first, and well, then I know your deadline was fake, right? So it's these little tricks at the table. I always say, see if they are justified, because it can be a deadline that you have to work with. But if they're not, then at least take all the, there's some smart tricks with which you can challenge those kind of dynamics or deadlines. So that's one. And then the other is, of course, the big tricks but that's sometimes because we are part of big public negotiations or negotiations where journalists really want to know, what's going on there. Yeah, if you then use media, for example, or all kind of ways to put pressure, or you get, parliamentarians or ministers or high-ranking civil servants all of a sudden picking up the phone, putting a lot of pressure on the other side. Those are, of course, tricks that are really harmful for the relation, but sometimes can flip the table immediately, and all of a sudden you're in a losing streak. Well, I tell people there's one thing you have as a negotiator, which is your image, your reliability. You don't want to play around with that too often, because people will hold it against you for a long time. And if you're, especially like us as professional negotiators, if you negotiate once at this table and the next time you run into the same, and this is a small country, if you run into the same people again, or people do their research on you and like, oh, that's the guy that pulled the trick in the other negotiation. Yeah, that's a trust issue. So and we also, again, here the answer to me is also relation, really making sure that through the relation, and even I did a few big negotiations. One was with the Mexican government, and it was stone cold in the beginning, and they were virtual negotiations. So the first thing I did was really work on the relation and sort of, getting the temperature above, what is it?
Freezing.
32 Fahrenheit. We call it 0 here, but getting the temperature back to normal. And with that, building a relation and finding that unity that Cialdini always talks about. So how can we solve this problem together? It took us months. And then the deal phase went quite quickly, ultimately, because we had a good relation. But also make sure you don't jump in, find something common to work on, show interest in the other person. And it ultimately resulted 2 years later, one of the parts of the deal that we had to travel up and down to look at implementation. And during the first trip, I shook hands with this person that, didn't come across as very friendly in the beginning. So we had a whole joint program, and it was also to make sure that we would keep this warm relation because we needed each other for the implementation. But the second evening, I ate something bad or touched something bad. I had a bad night, let's say. And the next morning, this person, he said, "You know what? Let me stop by a pharmacy. I will." He got me medication. He got me the special water you guys have there. If you, we made pictures of us standing together on a village square. It was hilarious. So that story, I always try to say, if I just started to negotiate with that person without first de-icing, let's say, the relation, we would have got I would probably still negotiating with them. And then, to me, that's still that picture of us standing together is still, well, I keep it to myself, but it's still a very nice picture. Yeah.
That's a nice illustration. In your opinion, what are some of the emerging trends in negotiations that professionals should be aware of, especially in the context of both a rapidly changing global landscape, as well as changes in technology?
Yeah, to me, so we are working a bit with AI currently here at the office, also trying to understand how AI can be helpful. So we fathomed, I don't know by which name you know the game, but it's basically the oil pricing game, the X and Y game, the win all you can game. That model we fed into AI and started negotiating with, let's say, the computer, as grandfather here says. And we saw that it basically takes the wrong exits as well, like humans do, based on emotion, based on loss aversion. It takes wrong exits there as well. So we now illustrate that every now and again. Basically, use AI to prepare your strategy, to know all about a person. to prepare, I don't know, speaking notes for the people that you need, prepare for your stakeholder engagement, maybe use AI, but don't trust AI. Because AI is still based on a lot of human input. And I think we all know that on human input is where negotiations sometimes really go wrong. Right. So that's one. I think it's not a new trend, but the way social media can be used to, well, let's say back in the day, you needed a proper journalist and or a proper TV show or whatever to create pressure on the table.
Right.
We always say there's pressure at the table and there's pressure on the table, right? So to create pressure on the table, you needed external people and you needed to convince them, and there was a risk, of course, there as well. Now that goes so quickly, and people might have an opinion on it. But you can also use it to your advantage, right? So there's ups and downs, I think, to the use of social media. But it's not, so sometimes negotiations need a bit of intransparency. Is that a word? Where like a closed room where you can let the process do its, have its own dynamics. And it's disturbed by the external world. And now it sounds like I'm a proponent of not working transparently. I'm not. I think there's a lot of, especially in governments, it's good to have some transparency vis-a-vis the society you're working for. But yeah, I always joke, if we need to organize a party and Aram and I want to work together, we don't want you in, Nolan, and we're going to write that all in a newspaper. In 2 seconds, we have a gigantic fight in this group. So you sometimes need that protection of, we can say a lot to each other and it won't go out of this room. And that's not like intransparent, like big system, we try to screw over society. That's not what it is. It's more like we as people, we need some protection to open up to each other. And if we would have done the negotiations I was just referring to in Mexico, if we would have done them with 2 journalists sitting next to us, then it's hard to create something together with which you can make the bend, sell the win, and also sell the loss or absorb the loss together.
Yeah, it reminds me of that concept of back channel negotiations, of being able to have the freedom to say things that need to get said so that we can work towards a solution. And of course, it makes me think about so many of the diplomatic challenges we're seeing today globally: Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Palestine. And some conversations are going to need to happen with a little less transparency, and that is really hard given the challenges you're talking about.
No, I agree, and I think wasn't it the Cuba crisis that was solved by 2 second secretaries of the embassies in Turkey, right? If I remember correctly. But I think you should also create these spaces. Here in the Netherlands, we were part of the we guided the negotiations on the agricultural accords, which was basically we're a very densely populated country. We need to make some very hard choices in how we want to do our agriculture, because we are, after the United States, we are the second largest agricultural exporter in the world. So it's a lot of agriculture. We're a very small country, right? So we needed to find a way to move forward, and there we let's say the starting point of those conversations was very angry farmers, new farmer groups. Let's say they were not the traditional farmer representative, but also new ones that were very, let's say, militant maybe, or aggressive, or blocking highways and getting their way with their big tractors, right? And getting the sympathy vote of the people, right? These were the people that feed us. So. And then, getting the industry, the banks, everybody should be around the table under the guidance of the Ministry of Agriculture. And there we also needed to find, because the press was constantly chasing the group. So we just asked a few farmers, hey, can we come to your farm in, 4 hours? And please keep this quiet. So we had all these secret locations. There were just big farms that we knew had some place to host a group. And there we could have these negotiations in a relatively safe environment for the people. And then there was always one joker who then called, like, we're at this farm right now, and then the media would come. And then that is the point where we also saw, like, maybe it's going too well at the table, and then people at the tables, they don't always have an interest in getting a deal. So they would call, and then that round was blown up.
So looking back on your career so far, what's one negotiation failure that you learned the most from? And also kind of on the other side of that coin, what is one negotiation success that you're most proud of?
Yeah, well, I think there's a lot of mistakes that I made, and I'm a bit of I like to make deals. I love deal making, so sometimes I go in too quickly. And I think really first understanding the other party really well, you should really take time for that. And sometimes I skip that phase, or I just do it in not enough time, let's say, taking for that phase. And especially here in The Hague, that sometimes is killing. In The Hague, I mean, in the government, the top of the government, you should sometimes take time, but people feel pressured. Not everybody has their interest aligned. So some people want to go quick, and others want to stall. So taking the right amount of time there is key. I find it hard to name examples because of the work I did. So it's more of a general lesson, I think, and it's also something it says something about me. I want to go too quickly every now and again, and the same I think goes for success. I like the negotiations best where people all come out celebrating themselves and the others as winners, where you actually sit at the end and really say, okay, this is our joint line to take in the press. I give you something. I give Nolan something. I give Aram something. We're all winners in this deal. Those are the ones that I like best, and that's what I take extra care of. Right, getting your internal, external stakeholders aligned and making sure no one loses in the deal. And then also not brag about it. I'll be silent about it forever at that point. Because I always joke, like if you both booked a holiday at, Booking or something, and we're in this beach in Florida together, and I tell you, I paid only $400 for this, and you paid $1,200. Guess what? You're not going to have this fun holiday. So I find it quite, let's say, unwise to talk about your negotiation results alone. So if it's together with the group that can celebrate the success, go for it. But alone, never take too much credit for the deal and give most credit to the others, because probably you're going to go negotiate with them quite soon again.
I appreciate your willingness to share that. We try to soften you up over the course of the program to be able to ask the vulnerable question where you made mistakes. I think that deal making mindset is something that many of us are guilty of. We feel the pressure to rush towards a deal, sometimes rush to failure. Taking that time, the right amount of time to understand. And then something you mentioned earlier that kind of I thought of too was that, hey, an implementation is going to be pretty important too. My job doesn't end just because the deal got done. Okay, we still have to implement this thing. And if I haven't created the conditions through how we negotiate to make that happen, I'm buying myself trouble down the road.
I think there's 3 phases. So one is the deal, like, okay, we get it now. Okay, perfect. Then people have to write it down. And that's where a lot of things still go wrong because, well, I meant this. Well, I know I meant this, right? So what is it? So what I always try to do is basically say, let's keep clear notes during the negotiation. And of course, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, but let's at least agree on what we now agreed on. And you can always come back to it. It's fine. But then we don't get to this, so that you at least have something to, like an anchor to fall back to. So that's the second phase. And then there's implementation. And I always say it's better to have a negotiated deal than a deal that was given to you by court, basically. But in both instances, people might try to find some extra room, there you need to be still in this joint. Let's not make our lives difficult mindset together. Making sure that you work diligently towards in the same mindset with which you made the deal.
Maarten, as we prepare to conclude here, what final piece of advice or key takeaway would you leave with a listener who's a young professional and aspiring to become a more effective negotiator?
Train yourself. To me, you can go to a beautiful business school somewhere in the US. No, but really, it's so I think you have skills professions like, I don't know, a doctor or a woodworker that you really have to learn that, right? And of course you can learn to become a negotiator by experience, like I was just saying about the general or the prime minister they said, well, I never did any negotiation course, so what are you asking me? So of course but I think you can gigantically save on the amount of mistakes that you made during this process by really properly training yourself up front. And after training, it's like driving a car, right? If you have your driver's license, you're sort of able to drive, but then you learn it in real traffic. And then every now and again, also ask other people, like, do you like my driving? So what I like about our company here is if we do really difficult negotiation, we form these echo groups, we call them, where we basically say, okay, what do you think? How do you think I'm doing? Because we call it belief in your own position in Dutch. So, if I tell you 10 times that I want to sell you this phone and it's, it's 500 euros. After the 10th time I said this to myself, I'm really believing in this fact. So my position, I really start to believe in my own position. And I always had very clear conversations with my wife at home where she was, really? Did you just, you're a bully, you shouldn't do this. And it really gives you a different perspective, right? And as the deal becomes more complex, talking to other negotiators, maybe also forming, I think that for your students, Aram, it's great to form like a resource group, like, I don't know, have this monthly lunch together or this breakfast at your office where you have other people that like negotiations or just have an opinion. Just mirror yourself, if that's English, mirror yourself with them and saying, this is my plan, this is what I'm doing. And then they would say, hey, but there's untapped potential here, or maybe have you considered this, or this is a really bad plan. To make sure that you keep freshening yourself up also during negotiations. That's it.
Yeah. I love that response. And I love the comparison. You made it a couple times where it is a craft. It's a skill. I can cut pieces of wood. That does not make me a craftsman or a carpenter. It takes skill. I can read the law. That does not make me a lawyer. It does take this practice and preparation, the intentionality you're talking about. So thank you for that. Thank you for all the insights today. It's been a wonderful discussion, Maarten. Really appreciate you joining us from across the pond.
Yeah, no, thanks. And again, thanks for waking up so early. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I will make everybody here in the Netherlands subscribe to NEGOTIATEx. I think it's insightful. So looking forward to conversations soon. And whenever you're here in the Netherlands, know where to find us. We have a really good cappuccino and espresso here. So
we will do that.
Great.
Yep. Thanks, Maarten, for joining us. And that is it for us on today's podcast. If you haven't already, please rate, review, and subscribe to the NEGOTIATEx podcast. And we'll see you in the next one. Hey, thanks for checking out this video on NEGOTIATEx TV. If you found any value at all, please hit the subscribe button, hit the notification icon if you want to be notified of future videos. And then we also have a couple videos over here that you might be interested in checking out. If you and your small business, your team are looking to get negotiations or leadership training, then you can head over to negotiatex.com and learn more about the coaching services we offer. Thanks, and I'll see you over in the next video.